Drilling fluids touch just about everything in the drilling process. We're here to deconstruct the drilling process and drilling fluid concepts to provide a deeper understanding of our industry. In each episode, we'll share information, talk to interesting people, and maybe share a few stories along the way. Welcome to the Flowline, a production of AES Drilling Fluids, brought to you by Matt Offenbacher and Justin Gauthier.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Flowline. Matt and I are here. Sorry, it's a long night with the little one last night, so I'm kind of groggy this morning, but life goes on. The show must go on. Matt, what's cracking, man? What's the latest and greatest? Anything fun and exciting? Whether it be sports, personal, tell the world what's happening in your life.
I was trying to think of what to get excited about, and I feel like my first hint of fall, believe it or not, it's August, okay? It's the end of August.
Yeah.
But it got, it was Saturday, I slept in a little late, and then I went running.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, why does it feel so good? Like, why do I feel so much faster? Why do I feel, like, great?
Yeah.
It got down to 75 degrees that morning.
Man, that makes a big difference.
It like above 80, and it was. I went this morning and it was like 81 degrees.
Yeah,
that 5 degree, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So it was the first hint of anything cooling.
It's wild to think.
Yeah,
that's good.
So
yeah, anything in the 70s in the morning feels great, whether it be working out or just walking to your car to go to work or whatever. But yeah, we speaking of that, we had practice last night. My daughter did, and the last few weeks has been rough. But last night was the first sort of true practice at the fields. A lot of it's been just kind of prep work and this and that. But it was nice. It was still in like the low 90s when she started. Cause it started at 5, but it ended at 7:30. And by 7:30 hit, it was a little breeze, probably like mid 80s. It was nice, and so that weather is definitely coming around. And in Houston you talk about weather a lot, and I feel like most adults do anyways, but when you get a blanket of heat throughout the summer and things start to turn the corner a little bit, it feels good. It's nice to be able to go outside, and whether it be for kids stuff or even just like yourself going for runs in the mornings or evenings, it makes it a little more bearable, more willing to be outside. So.
Yes, which is relevant to many of our listeners, because I can imagine they can't wait for the weather to turn if you're on a rig out in West Texas or in East Texas.
Yeah,
anywhere along the Gulf Coast, really. Although the Northeast, I got a call from one of our account managers up there, and he was like, it was 49 degrees when I woke up. The cold front hit. It was like, whoa. Stop showing off.
Do you like cold weather being from here?
No, I don't. But if it's like 50 degrees in the morning and warms up to 70, which I think is like why people live in San Diego or whatever, right? I could do that all year long.
Yeah, I hear you. Growing up in Canada again, which I'm sure everybody knows, it's I look forward to the heat, and so I love the heat. But you kind of get used to, or you don't really get used to the 100 and 110 degree weather, but it's you live to deal with it, and we live here, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. But
no.
Nonetheless, enough about the weather. As we talk about that, it's again funny. I feel like old and getting old. I like the weather.
We need more rain. My lawn.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, talk about drilling fluids, Matt. I think it was maybe last two episodes, we had talked about contamination with regards to water-based mud. Obviously, whenever you're drilling, you never know what can happen. And contamination is likely to occur one way or the other. So like we have it in water-based mud, obviously we have it in oil-based mud. And so we'll kind of continue down that sort of that path of, understanding what contaminants there are with regards to the different systems. And today we're going to talk about oil-based mud, and then how to, typical treatments and how you can handle that kind of stuff. Matt, what do you think?
I like it. Yeah, I mean, sort of wrap up the series, if you will.
Yeah, perfect. Yep. Well, let's start off, Matt. When it comes to contamination, when you're drilling with oil-based mud, let's start with gases. That is, I would say, probably more common than some of the other ones.
Yeah, and I think with the water-based, we started with gases too, and the thing with oil-based mud is, I mean, one of the reasons we like it is you don't have as many of those chemical reactions where fluid properties just go haywire. However, there will be signs.
Mm-hmm.
And the two primary gas. I mean, granted, you could have natural gas, methane, but a lot of what we run into is actually CO2 or H2S. And it's worth being very considerate of the fact that these gases, particularly H2S, is pretty soluble in your base oil. And why that's meaningful is that because it goes into solution, you have these very tiny little droplets under pressure that are getting into the drilling fluid. But as your hydrostatic column is, your pressure decreases as this fluid circulates up the annulus. You have less pressure on that, so that bubble is getting bigger volumetrically. And what that means is, it could be a lot more that you see relative to where you started out downhole as far as the volumes you're going to encounter.
Yeah.
This is the same concern with well control. If you were taking, a hydrocarbon, why you see the pit volumes increase is because the gas is expanding so fast that the fluid was one volume under pressure, but as you take away that pressure, it expands rapidly. So that's one thing to be, very considerate of. From the sort of subtle signs, especially with CO2, but you're going to see this with H2S as an acid gas, you will see a drop in your excess lime. Probably more of the conversation we see with this with CO2 is simply because H2S sets off all the detectors, right? Like we react. With CO2, it's, why am I having such a hard time maintaining my excess lime? And it's reacting with CO2. What are we going to do? I mean, one, we really hope that we can wait up. You can add lime. You may want to sort of be leery of one important thing with lime, as we've talked about in the past, is that it does help, not all, but some emulsifier packages perform. And in light of that, if you're stripping out a bunch of the lime, you may be concerned about how oil wet or how the overall fluid properties, which you might see change. So throwing a little extra wetting agent is not a horrible idea. And then, obviously, if we can wait up and kill whatever's coming in on us, I think that really spares us any more misery.
Yeah.
And of course, if it's H2S, you need to throw a scavenger in there. Some of the zinc oxide or something like that. If you're allowed to use zinc, the convenient thing about it is it's not very soluble. Like it is kind of not fully soluble in the aqueous phase, so it'll roam around in the oil long enough that it'll probably pick it up.
Oh.
Just as a contingency.
Yeah.
So I think I know we've run into crazy amounts of CO2 in certain areas. We've even run a CO2 scavenger with lime.
Okay.
Because we were fighting it so aggressively. That's a lot of CO2.
Yeah. And I think a key thing to remember here is when it comes to gas or gas as a contamination, remember that is a form of an influx, right?
Yes.
And so there is a slight imbalance. And so naturally, sort of the rule 101 is stop the flow. So if you can, obviously waiting up is always an option, being mindful of the frac gradient as well. But it's but then too, sometimes it does sort of just come into the system, and there's ways to treat it clearly. But if you let it get away from you too much, then it could be disastrous. But fortunately, with alarms and if you're doing your proper mud checks, then it's pretty manageable.
Yes.
I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see most of the time it's easy to say, oh well, it's just CO2 and not react as quickly, and then I think you have the temptation to try and deal with it, and then you see a lot of CO2, and it's like, okay, waiting up is probably you feel like you can get away with it because it's just CO2.
Yeah.
But anytime you have these things flowing in, you don't know how much worse it's going to get, that sort of thing. It's not a horrible idea to just kill it if you can.
That's right. Okay. Moving on to another form of an influx, and something we see, very commonly, especially in certain basins like the Permian, is water flows.
Yes.
If you've drilled with oil-based mud and you've taken on water, it can be a pain. Again, it's manageable, but let's walk through that.
Yeah. So you're likely taking in at least, sometimes it's a frac hit, but a lot of times it's produced water from near saltwater disposal wells. And so, the obvious signs, in all likelihood, it depends on the salinity of the mud you're running, but most of the time our internal phase salinity is going to be higher, so it should come down. You should see your oil-water ratio come down because you're taking on more water. And sometimes, it might just be a couple of barrels, and sometimes it can be a lot, And what happens is generally you'll see the mud properties start to break down. So you'll see a thickening effect. You'll see some gelation. You'll see an increase in fluid loss. And there's sort of that, awkward stage of deciding, all right, especially if we took a huge flow, what are the economics of just displacing this out and kind of trashing what's downhole and keeping everything in my surface pits versus bringing it back? And a lot of, I think all of us have a spreadsheet where we can demonstrate the economics of here's what's going to cost to fix this. Here's what it's going to cost to just move on. The goal, of course, would be like with gas, like can we kill the flow by waiting up? And the frustrating thing there, of course, is sometimes you're taking a flow higher up and then you can break down the formation below you, and now you've got a flow and losses. Yeah. And so you can have a mess on your hands. And so the question is, do you just like switch to brine? Do you make some of these other decisions? But a lot of it depends on how much water you're taking, which to some degree, there's two things, I suggest. One, make sure you're doing a 2-salt check on your chlorides. But since your salt water that likely came in is predominantly sodium chloride, you can probably back calculate what you're taking, along with back calculating kind of the volumes that you're seeing, change in your oil-water ratio, all that kind of stuff. And you can say, look, we're just taking a couple of barrels an hour. Let's dust up and kind of, treat the system a little more and work with what got into my internal phase, versus like, this is bad. Like, let's figure out what the most economic way forward is.
Yeah, and this stuff can range, right? Like you could be a couple barrels an hour up to hundreds of barrels an hour. So it's not a one-size-fits-all treatment type of deal. But one thing that I'll do a humble brag here, especially when it comes to an emulsifier that you've got in the system. Fortunately, you and the team have designed obviously tons of products, but when it comes to the emulsifier package we have, and then on top of that, we also, due to the sort of the environment out in places like the Permian where we see a lot of water flows, you can buy some time if you've got a very high performing emulsifier package. And so, not to necessarily pump our products, but can you sort of help understand when you've got a good mud system with quality products, how that might help buy time or help sort of like withstand some of the blunt force you're seeing with the system?
Sure. And it's kind of a basket of things. So one of the important things is how an emulsion breaks down is when you start taking water, an emulsifier is trying to take that water and put it in the internal phase. And those little droplets that you have, as it destabilizes, they sort of coalesce and stick to each other. And instead of like nice little spheres that we always show in like the graphics in our mud schools, they're like globs. And that's when you start seeing the kind of peanut butter, I got to shovel this stuff out of the pits kind of thing. Yeah. So with excess emulsifier or a robust emulsifier that can tolerate more water, and sometimes this may be a reason to go easy on the clay, which is why sometimes we might go with a low clay system. What you can do is you can handle a bit more water. Your flow properties are still gonna, you might end up with a 50-50 oil-water ratio, but you may still have good enough flow properties to circulate and kind of make your adjustments so it buys you that time. Yeah. The other thing is, we have a supplemental product to sort of help bring you back. And one of the objectives behind that is these emulsifiers perform not different necessarily, but they can perform differently under different salinities. One thing is that these surfactants, they have a side that likes water and a side that likes oil. And some of them need what you'd call free water. They need to see a lot of available water to like attach to the water side, like kind of line up. Yeah. We have found there's actually other surfactant chemistry that loves salt because it sort of gives it no choice but to go to the water, because it's like the only place to go is the little available water left. And so at high salinity, it works really well. And with a lot of water, it seems to be confused on what to do. So when you can come up with sort of a combination of these things to deal with calcium chloride and sodium chloride and shifts in salinity at the same time, we were able to come up with a product that could sort of say, okay, I'm going to sort of take care of everything here when things get messy and limit how an emulsion might break down and those droplets coalescing more quickly. So buys you time, gives you better flow properties, allows you to kind of recondition the mud before you have to look around and say, I don't know if I want to spend the money to try and get this back.
Nice.
So.
Okay. No, I'm glad you, again, elaborated on that. I think it's important for folks to understand that. Moving on to salt. That's another good one. So let's run through that.
This is actually a pretty good tie-in to the question you just asked, because one of the things we see when we drill through salt, a lot of it's sodium chloride, and there's not as, once again, great time to run a 2-salt check. But what you may encounter when you drill through salt is if you start stressing the emulsion, and a lot of, most of our products do fine with this stuff, but you will see kind of the mud will start to look dull. What is happening is, you may see an increase in viscosity, water in the filtrate, the ES drops. What is happening is salt solids really, really like water, right? And you have a wetting agent that is trying to oil wet everything. And when you have a lot of salt cuttings and that wetting agent is trying to just find its way as quickly as possible to the salt, because it's the most water wet thing there, you can strip it out. You can deplete your wetting agent really, really quickly. And then that starts to stress the emulsion. So, we drill through a lot of salt sections with our conventional oil-based mud, and we don't see much. We don't bring that much into solution. But there are cases in the past where drilling with salt, this is where the 2-salt check sort of began.
Okay.
What was happening is in the Gulf of Mexico, there was this huge play, sub-salt is what they called it, right? Big salt layer. You got to drill through it. People were running 1-salt checks, not knowing what their chlorides were, kept adding salt, had, basically salt crystals circulating around as solids. It was depleting the wetting agent. The mud was having stability issues. And so it was like, you need to know how much sodium chloride you have and how much calcium chloride you have as you do this, because you can add too much salt thinking you're just adjusting your internal phase to where it needs to be. But when you have a relatively high salinity, there's also not a lot of room for that salt to go into your internal phase, right? So calcium chloride is going to push sodium chloride out of the way. But between that and perhaps you supersaturate your internal phase, which doesn't really happen very often. I can do it in the lab if you need something real ugly to look at. But that goes back to the sort of water flow concept where the surfactant can't find the water, and so it just doesn't make the emulsion droplet, and then you start seeing water in the filtrate and stuff like that. So stressed oil wetting and difficulty of your emulsifier performing could be things that happen. So
Got it.
2-salt check is big there.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of gives you your marching orders on what to do from there.
Got it. Are you seeing a lot of folks? Is it common for folks? And it wasn't when I was in the field, so I might be out of touch on it. But nowadays, with just the different sort of the environment of geology, how it's been shifting with all the drilling we've been doing, are you seeing a lot of folks doing 2-salt checks just as like standard, or only when needed?
Honestly, I think we saw a lot more people running single salt checks for a while. And then one of the big things that changed is when we started drilling all our intermediates with brine, you had sodium chloride in the pits, and it wasn't the first well, but it was just over time. You realize, like, okay, something doesn't add up. And then everybody was like, let's just run 2-salt checks.
Yeah.
So I think out of caution, I recommend it. I don't want to get in anybody's business, but it's one of those, if you ever have a question and you haven't been running a 2-salt check, you need to.
Gotcha.
That's kind of, yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on. Another contaminant that maybe not as common, or it is common, but not, sort of the way we'll title it here, is osmotic pressure differential. Talk a little bit about that and how that could be a contaminant.
So I guess it's probably... I guess I'd see it as a contaminant from the perspective of water, either from the formation contaminating your mud, or you contaminating the formation with what's in your mud. And what this looks like is the internal phase of an invert emulsion, when you have basically the salt can't move through that membrane, but the water can. So osmosis. Now, what we generally see, and I've said this in the past, I think we typically see cavings and we say, aha, it's a salinity issue, when you probably really needed to wait up.
You're right.
But what happens is you can embrittle the formation by pulling water from it. So you have very high salinity in your internal phase. The formation doesn't have that. The water is drawn away from the formation, and you see some cavings. It's possible usually in younger formations, like this is a lot more common offshore, Gulf of Mexico, that kind of thing. And what they found is when they lowered the salinity of the internal phase and got closer to matching or balanced activity is what they call it, things got a lot more stable. The flip side of this is typically what happens is someone says, we need to drop the salinity a ton because we're causing the wellbore to come in. And then the other thing happens where now we start hydrating the cuttings. So water's moving from the mud into the formation, and you're saying, I'm drilling with oil-based mud and I have sticky cuttings at the shakers. And it's, oh, well, didn't want to do that either. So I think, a hygrometer can help you sort of narrow it down, but from a perspective of contamination, if you will, I think it's one of those just beware of, because it gets into the mix with everything else, particularly when we're talking about salt. And, it could be you drill into salt and then your water activity isn't correct because you're not doing a 2-salt check and you don't realize where you're at, all that good stuff. So thought we'd throw it in.
Yeah, no, that's a good one to add. Let's talk about gas stripping.
Yeah, so this probably should go back towards the gases, although I probably put it more in like the condensate type. But in essence, your static downhole, whatever, you have some sort of condensate seep its way in, and you see some sort of settling of barite, and then you start coming out of the hole and you see like gas cup mud or the well starts to flow. I mean, obviously, if it's hydrocarbon based, wait up, absolutely. Like this is a well control type consideration. But we've encountered condensate, or we've encountered what we believe to be some gas after some static operations. And it's like, oh, we had sag. And I'm like, I actually think maybe we had a little bit of gas stripping here. And the problem is, if you're not watching your pressures, it can be sort of like sag, where it's like, okay, what is your real hydrostatic pressure right now? Because we need to think this through before we start doing a bunch of movements and possibly break down the formation inadvertently while we're trying to kill a potential flow. Yeah. So, that it can happen. It exists. Henceforth, it made the list.
No, that's, again, it's, when you think of contaminants, a lot of times you just think right away like water flow or gas, but again, clearly there's a number that can contaminate the fluid. And so the last one, again, you wouldn't consider it contaminant, kind of like we talked about in the water-based mud section. And this is inevitable. It's going to happen as long as you start drilling.
Yes.
But solids. Talk about the solids contamination.
So, I mean, look, we all know solids affect tools and equipment and all those other things. But, from a mud properties perspective, you should see it in your retort trends. You should see gel progression. If the mud is getting stressed because of drilled solids, you might see your electrical stability go down, higher fluid loss. And, in that situation, a lot of times, we would recommend dilution. But there's a lot of times where we might find ourselves, hey, it's the end of a pad. I'm not going to do much. I'm not willing to do much. This may be where something like a thinner or extra wetting agent might be able to buy you a little bit of wiggle room. But it's a temporary fix, if you will. It's not going to get you from well to well to well. With solids, ultimately, you're going to have to dilute. Yeah. But check your equipment. If something's out of the ordinary, maybe we've got to bypass the shakers. Maybe something isn't quite right. But some of the things you'll see from adverse effects it can affect your ROP. Your plastic viscosity will go up, and then just one of the phenomena that you see from these degraded fluid properties is when these fine solids, there's so much surface area that it's just very, very difficult to fully oil wet them, and then they start clabbering up and creating issues for you that you would normally have. And that's when a more expensive, thinner wetting agent may give you a little bit more, but it's not a cure-all.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, and too, I can't stress enough, there's some philosophies when it comes to solids control that, no solids control is good solids control. But I tell you, I've been on enough wells and we've seen it enough where if you've got a good solids control, I guess, program in place, this can eliminate a ton of issues and headache. But again, solids it's something we'll always deal with. I don't think we'll ever get to 100% solids control efficiency, and so it's a constant battle.
Yeah.
So anyone out there that's drilled with, especially oil-based mud, I mean water-based mud as well, but water's a little bit cheaper than diesel, so you can kind of hammer to it in a little bit more. But anyway, there you have it, folks. Contaminants. If you have any other ones that you'd like us to discuss or dive further into any of these, of course, reach out. Happy to chat through it. Matt, anything else you can think of for the listeners on just broadly speaking, contamination with drilling fluids?
I think that education's a big part of this.
Big time, yeah.
I think a lot of people follow their convictions on what they think is happening, and the more we can hone that in, I think better, especially communication with the field and, hey, this is why we're doing what we're doing, because you misdiagnose some of these things and they just get to be frustrating.
Yeah.
But if we can pinpoint it and everybody understands the right way forward, we can avoid kind of the why aren't things going the way we were hoping for.
Yeah.
So I would say, looking for those signs, making sure your mud checks are tight so you can say, here's what 3 hours ago looked like. Do you understand why I want to do what I want to do? Can really help when you have to react and provide a treatment plan based upon what's happening right then and there. That evidence can go a long way if everybody's got confidence in it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And with that being said, folks, again, if you have any thoughts, questions, or ideas for a show, reach out to us on LinkedIn. Be sure to connect with AES Fluids on LinkedIn. Lots of great content put out there. And then, like I've said before, check out YouTube if you'd like to, more visually kind of see some of the educational pieces that Matt and his team have put out. It's a great resource. Website also has a ton of information. Or if you just want to simply send us a good old email, you can reach us at the Flowline podcast at aesfluids.com. And with that being said, thanks for listening. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Please tune in next week for another exciting episode of The Flowline. And remember, may your returns always be full and your trips always smooth. Views expressed in this program belong to participants and not their employees. The program is for informational purposes only and cannot take the place of seeking professional advice. Copyright AES Drilling Fluids.